Hello and welcome to the Valley. Today I am your host, Janet Michael. It is the Valley Business. Today I am back on the Zooms with my dear friend Carl Knobloch. He is the Virginia District Director of the Small Business Administration. And Carl, today we are talking about one of your favorite topics, which is manufacturing, because we got to tour a local manufacturing plant a few weeks ago.
And it was just amazing. As I always tell people, in the rural communities, you really don't know what is there until you go looking for it.
And to be honest, we had to look for this one. It was a little complicated to get
I remember,
to.
the first time I drove by, I said, well, where is it? I looked at its website. It doesn't look like this.
So the Tampa, Virginia Regional Chamber has recently started a manufacturing networking group. And so you and I signed up to go to one of their meetings, their first Friday of every month. So on June 6th, we headed to Berryville and we went to Trelleborg Marine Systems. And you did better than I did getting on their website and looking at it. I got on their website briefly because I thought that they made boats. I did not know that they make those giant fenders. You got into their website a little bit further than I actually did at a glance.
I was totally fascinated seeing the different designs. And you think about what the classic at a dock is, just old tires. And you look at a tugboat, it's just tires. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at this whole sophisticated system. And I was just going, wow.
After the meeting portion, he gave us a tour of the facility that they have there in Clark County. And so we got to see some of the finished product. We got to see what some of the materials look like before they become the fenders. And then we got to see their ginormous bay where they do the painting. There's a lot that happens to those things when they're in salt water, when they're up against a dock and a ship is smacking into them. They make them for buoys. It was a whole lot more involved than what I expected it to be.
What you laugh about is as big as the facility looked and what they made, they only have 23 employees. That was the amazing part of it. And then when you look further, they're a subset of a major manufacturing operation out of Sweden, totally global.
That was the other thing that I thought was kind of cool, particularly for those of us here in this Shenandoah Valley community, is that you have this company that has offices in Sweden. I think he said they had offices in Houston, Texas. They are creating steel plants in India, I think he said, and in China.
Houston is what we call the U.S. base headquarters. The manufacturing facility is Berryville. And then they had a location in the U.K. They have one in China. Everybody that's going to do business in China is going to have one in China. And that was the one thing he really talked about is in a lot of these countries, if they're going to be a major impact on economy or what they do for a business, you pretty much got to be ready to put a facility there to keep the business. And that's, I think, the fascinating part. And that's what we see with our manufacturing initiative now is if you want to do business in the United States, you better have a facility. And I always look back many years ago at the automotive industry with Honda being one of the first and Toyota to set up facilities in the South just for that reason to say we're selling cars here in the United States.
The meeting that we sat in on before we did the tour was other manufacturing representatives. Some people that were there represented businesses that were manufacturing adjacent, I guess we could say. But this is really a roundtable for them to sit around the table and talk to other people in the manufacturing industry and say, hey, are you guys having an issue with this or with that? Workforce was one of the topics of that conversation on that Friday morning.
As amazing as we talk about how the economy's doing in every place, we still see every place we go hiring all the time. And manufacturing is one of the biggest that needs talent. And it's one of the best paying jobs that you can come out of high school. Even the trades, which is very good, cannot compete with manufacturing jobs.
And it is not at all what I think most people of my generation think that it is or remember that it is. I have the EDAs on quite frequently, and we're always talking about the different manufacturing industries that we have here in the Shenandoah Valley. And I always use the example that my dad, when I was young, worked at one of those plants, and he would come home just a hot mess. He was filthy, he was dirty, he was grimy, he worked third shift. That's not what it's like now.
I always tell people you can walk into a facility and you look at the concrete, you immediately know what type of operation it is.
I've been to Monoflow locally, and he is very proud of the fact that you could literally eat off the floors.
And that's what a lot of the young people really don't understand is how clean operations are now and how important it is that the product stay clean because of where the application is going to be used, especially anything in food, anything in medical. Even now, it's getting to the point where when we talk technology, it's got to be clean.
Even the Amazon warehouses. You don't technically think of that as manufacturing because it is warehouse and logistics, but they are incredibly technologically advanced and also incredibly clean.
They're building these huge facilities, and I laugh because in Virginia Beach, on one side of the road, they're building a distribution center, big one, and on the other side, street, they're building a unit where they're basically bringing the stuff in to warehouse it, and that's totally robotic. And that's what we talk about is what is going on with technology, and logistics is not going to change. Wherever the customer wants and needs, the people that are providing it are going to have to meet the demand. And as we become a society of I want it now instead of in 10 minutes, you see what people are willing to do and also what they're willing to pay to make sure they have it that quickly.
When we got our Amazon warehouse in Winchester, I was very excited because I thought that meant they would start bringing me my stuff via drone. And then I could have it within a couple hours of hitting buy now. I'm one of those people.
I think the thing that was really fascinating when we took the tour is 23 employees, and at least a half dozen had over 20 years with the company. And their longest term employee had almost 47 years with the company. And what did he say? They've been there, what, 65 years or something like
Oh,
that?
yeah. They
Yeah. So,
originally started with that plant in Clearbrook, where I grew up, and it was called Seaward International. And so they either, I can't remember if he said they bought out Seaward or if they just changed the name from Seaward to Trelleborg, which is a Swedish name. But I knew exactly where that plant was that he was talking about. But yeah, and that guy that had been there 47 years, he's still trying to decide whether or not he wants to retire, which speaks to how much he enjoys that job.
yeah. And you saw it dedicated because they work 4 10-hour shifts, basically. That Friday we were there, they weren't running, but they were loading trucks, and he was there loading the truck. That's what's so fascinating with manufacturing because the shifts are so different and they basically go on what demand is. And you got to be adaptable. You go into one industry, it's air conditioned, another one, it isn't. You just have to realize there's different dynamics. But I think that with young people today, they assume they want to be, I'm here, instead of willing to start at the foundation and work your way up
They want to
to
walk in
really
as a CEO.
and you and I talked about it at length about how do you get young people interested in this sector. And we had a couple of educational institutions, high school level ones, that were there in the meeting. And they were talking about that they had programs for their high school students to focus on manufacturing. And they were very proud of that and trying to get the talent ready to go to these companies. Why don't the young people know where companies are there? Just like you and I talked about, I wouldn't have known this was ever here. Berryville, I'm thinking, wait a sec, in this bed and breakfast, and it's right there on the border of West Virginia and Maryland. And all of a sudden, here we are in this facility. Why doesn't the region do short clips of the different industrial sectors that are in the region so people really understand what is going on and what is serving the local community, what is serving the national community, and what's serving the global community? So people truly understand how impactful the region is. And there is a lot of manufacturing that's in that region that a lot of people just take for granted, but it's big impactors.
Oh, yeah. We can't throw a rock in Frederick County in particular and not hit some sort of manufacturing plant. And I would hazard a guess that probably more than half, if not 70% of the people that live here know where those places are, but they have no idea what kind of product they're making. They have no idea what goes on behind those four walls. They just know, oh, yeah, that's where such and such company is. But that's all that they know about that company.
Troberg, as we were learning about the fenders, it was funny because he says, yeah, we touch all of you, but you don't know who we are. Because he says that they're big into the automotive, that pretty much every car has something of theirs. And it was like, wow, here we go with like the BASF commercial that
Yeah, we don't
you
make the
don't know it.
products that you use, but we make the products that you use better or safer
Yeah,
or are part of those products.
everybody always sees the final product. They don't see everything else that goes into making that product. If we took the raw materials from Trelleborg out of the formula, you wouldn't get a fender. But other manufacturers had to make those other products so we could actually get a fender.
They're looking very closely now at trying to even be more sustainable. One of the things that he showed us as we were leaving their plant was that they're taking their leftover materials and they're sending them off to somewhere else to be able to use them for other things, which is really cool when you see that manufacturing is also trying to play a role in sustainability.
Having come from manufacturing, we will find ways to become sustainable because those become revenue streams. People don't understand that. We don't want waste because if we got waste, we pay. And so if there's a way we can use it someplace else or take it back into the process, we're going to. Sustainability has been going on for years in the manufacturing sector because the bottom line is the more waste you throw away, the less profit you have. That's why they're always looking at ways, how do I get more sophisticated? Like when you show this product, now immediately I'm starting to think of other sectors I could eventually use this in. They're just barely scraping the surface right now. And I'm thinking, oh no, there are ways this could start being used. But for them right now, that's not really hitting them yet, but eventually it will. One of their main components is steel. They talked about the tariffs and Chinese steel, and that even with a 100% tariff, it's still cheaper than U.S. steel.
That was one of the questions that somebody asked him. How are you handling with tariffs? And I was pretty surprised at his answer. I mean, part of it I expected because when you can't say, okay, it's going to be this price for this period of time, it makes it more complicated to do estimates and job quotes and things like that. But the fact that he said it was even still cheaper with the tariffs to get it somewhere else was shocking to me.
And that's when he talked about that India is now a thing where they're trying to get their steel approved. So they have another sector, even though they have tariffs, theirs are more friendly. What's really interesting is he says if our customers say they don't want Chinese steel in it, we don't put Chinese steel in it.
I didn't know
And
you could do that either.
yeah,
So when they're saying made in America, you can actually conform your product for that particular customer. They may pay more for it, but to a lot of people, it's worth that extra money.
if the customer's willing to pay for it, that's the way it turns out. It's about the relationships internationally people have with each other. There's disagreements between countries. You're going to see that type stuff that this doesn't come in our country if you're using any of their products from that country. And so it's even more important for traceability that these companies have to do a better job. And that's what he was talking about. The technology before, it used to be we created the fender and then we put our quote unquote our logo on it and then we had a trackable number. And now he says we're venturing into AI and we're putting a QR code on it. The company can literally go in and put specific information like actually where is this fender located, so they can do what I call aftermarket, which is where the real money is going to be made, is operation and maintenance. Instead of building a whole new fender, what do I have to do just to clean this up to keep it functional? Now they're venturing to operation and maintenance. So teams are going to go out there and do that work.
It was really interesting because he said in that QR code, they can embed any of that information. So once they get it to wherever it's going, this company may decide they want to move it to a different port, or if it's going to be on a buoy somewhere out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, they can drop GPS coordinates. They can look at the history and say, okay, this was serviced on this date and this date. This is exactly where it's located. This is when we bought it. This is where it was manufactured. It is mind blowing the amount of information that they can now embed in each of those products.
Why is that important? Once again, it's about saving money. That will save money versus how many years ago did we put that out there? And then you're trying to look at a traceability log and it's been moved 3 or 4 times and not knowing what it's really been through. One of their big customers is the cruise ships. I had to laugh when he made his joke about the fact that they bragged about how they could put anything on it. And so somebody recommended Mickey Mouse and Disney said, no, we can't hit Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, that was the thing too, that you don't necessarily think of something like that that is highly functional to also have your corporate colors on it or have a logo of some sort on it. But people want to brand everything these days.
If you can do the colors of the rainbow, you got it made. Especially in the United States, you got it made. If you want just basic colors, a black, clear, natural, that's where China's always going to win because that's just big lot run. And job lot is where you make your money.
One of the people that was at that meeting with us was Stacy Barrett, and Stacy operates Barrett Machines. And a lot of people, when they hear manufacturing, they think of places like Trelleborg, like Kraft, like Ashworth Brothers, these other places that we have here. But she is literally a manufacturing place of a different sort because they're making the parts and creating the things, is kind of like what he was saying, to make other things run and operate. I don't think people associate those as part of the manufacturing industry.
I'll use the example of the Department of Defense. Everybody always hears about the first generation weaponry and equipment and everything, but there's a lot of second and third generation equipment. It's still functional, but can we get parts? Because companies that used to make that part are going out of business. And so it's like, can I find it? Or otherwise, do I have to end the life of that functioning unit? Well, I was just at activity. Look at the age of the B-52 and how old it is. And he said, yeah, we can keep it going for another 100 years as long as we can get the parts.
It's been probably a year or so ago. You and I were in Shenandoah County. We were meeting up with Olivia, and she brought a bunch of businesses together. This was way before the Mount Jackson 5, but the woman that had the duck pin bowling alley, and she was having an issue and needed some sort of part replaced and couldn't find the part. Being able to make parts on a local level is incredibly valuable in this area.
And that's a sector. A lot of people think of bowling just bowling, but candlepin bowling or duck pin bowling, depending on which one you're talking about, has very old equipment, but they're still operational and people still like to use them. So if you can make those components, it's well worth it. I remember one time I went into an organ manufacturer that makes them for the churches and things like that. Amazing what they did. And they only had 10 employees. But they would refurbish those organs, and they were the only ones that were making the parts. And I'm thinking, what happens if they go out of business? What are the organs going to do?
That's the day the music died.
There are opportunities.
So let's say I want to start a company and I want to make a widget of some sort. Is it crazy, unrealistically complicated for me to say, look, I don't want to have somebody in another country make this. I want to make it right here. Is it that complicated? Is it a matter of it's going to take some time for build out? What's involved with starting a manufacturing company?
You bring up a very valid point. So let's look at it. If it's new technology, like when they talked about the CHIP Act, making that type of facility, yes, that's years in the process. But areas like polymers, I'll just use, if you were going to make injection molded parts, there's equipment readily available. As long as you understand how to use the equipment, it's just getting the molds made for the part you're going to make. And so it's understanding those dynamics and is there a sector that's available. That's why I try to tell everybody, like when we look at Trelleborg, don't look at the end product as what you're going to make. Look at the supply chain. And that's what they're stressing, the supply chain. Can you make a part of that supply chain that helps them out? And that's where a lot of people are trying to look at the end product versus supply chain. Like when I was in polymers, I was the supply chain. You tell me the formula, what you wanted to do and everything. That's what I did. My thing was a part of the product, but it was the end product that was made by somebody else.
Like
And
you were
so
telling me about the tips on the
yeah.
flags.
American flag. Yeah. This is what we try to stress to people. You see the American flag, but you would never know I was involved in it until somebody told you, yeah, he was the one that gave us the raw material so we could make it into that. It just depends on the sector. But yes, there's an investment, but there is used equipment around. People can't put things together, but it's understand sector. You just can't come in and say, oh, I can do this. It's no, you really do have to understand how the sector works and how it thinks. Each industry sector, whether it's construction, manufacturing, technology, they all have their language. And if you can't talk their language, it's kind of hard to sit there and say, yeah, I'm here to help you out. You got to be able to talk their talk and relate. One of the reps that came from Trek, he came over and he said, I started at the bottom and I've been with the company 10 years and worked my way up to where I'm at and I'm still learning. I still need to learn a lot more if I want to work my way up further. That's what manufacturing is. It's not what people think about many years ago. We just keep making the same thing on a continuous basis. Now it's short job lot runs, quick. We don't want a lot of inventory. COVID proved you have no inventory. We can't make things. We can't make the final product because we don't have all these pieces. Now that's a discussion that industry sectors are trying to figure out. which components do we actually have to have warehousing of those components so we can still maintain ourselves in time of need. A big group that's discussing that is Department of Defense. When Toyota came out with that model just in time and everybody finally bought into it, COVID showed that just in time doesn't work. And defense saw how critical it is. We do have to have some type of supply chain that we can call on things time of need. That's a thing that's changing in the industry. And somebody that learns how to develop that model is going to be an opportunity.
You mentioned Trex. Who would have thought that making deck boards out of plastic bags would be a thing? And now not only is it a thing that no matter what brand you're getting, you still call it Trex. Because they own that industry. Not everybody starts off the size that Trex is now. So you could take an idea and start off small and be the next Rockefeller and be the next whatever of a major manufacturing industry.
That's kind of what the president's been focused on with the manufacturing initiative, not only in the first term, but more in the second term. One of the key areas that they're focusing on is regulations. There are so many regulations that impact the bottom line. It is one area they get that under control, and that's why they're asking the manufacturers, what regulations slow you down that take away from your profits? Because you have to comply. I remember I had one because we worked with chemicals and all that. So I had to deal with 4 different agencies with disaster plans. I couldn't have just one disaster plan. I had to have a separate one for each one. And it was like, really? So they want their specific things in those. And sometimes they conflict with each other. And that's what makes it even crazier is when they conflict. And there are regulations that conflict. And so if that gets cleaned up, that's going to help a lot. Because now it will be easier to get into the market because people weigh what the cost of that regulation is going to be and they say, I'm just not going to do it. It's not worth it.
Before we wrap up, I want to make sure that people understand that you personally are always available to say, hey, I'm hitting this roadblock, or I'm thinking about expanding here, or I want to start up. But the SBA in particular has a ton of resources. There's sometimes are funding options that you can point people in the right direction for. That's kind of what the whole department is there for, right?
You point out a classic thing. We're like the hotline for the manufacturing regulations. And then they're also looking at the federal contracting regulations that are also impediments because defense needs manufacturers. And then a lot of people don't understand agencies that are involved. Like we talk about the Manufacturing Extension Program, which is Gen Edge in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's a program through the Commerce that's funded to help manufacturers. And then the state helps put money into that. And then the company will pay a small amount of money for the services. But those are things. A lot of people don't realize that actually Department of Energy in Oak Ridge has additive manufacturing, advanced technology to the next level going on right now. These are all these things that lots of people that are working the day to day don't realize how these federal agencies could potentially help them. I'll give you a case in point. You think of a wind turbine blade, how it's typically made today, and they talk about the warehouse. Think about if you could make it just on site. There's a company that can do it, and they're using drones. And those drones only fly for 5 minutes. But one of the things that was a problem, if there was a defect, you had to fix that defect after the fact. So they went to NASA and got NASA's technology that they used to land on the surface of the moon and put it on their drones. And now the drones can fix it as they're building it.
That is such a classic case of you don't know what you don't know until you tell somebody what your problem is. And lo and behold, they have a solution or know someone who has a solution.
And that's why I tell people there are a lot of fascinating things that are sitting on the shelf in a lot of federal labs that nobody knows about. And that's why I always try to learn from manufacturers to sit here and say, have you thought of this from what I've learned from the federal labs? It's up to them whether they want to try to look at pursuing the opportunity, but it's really low risk just to try to make it happen.
I'm like that with marketing, but you're like the savant for manufacturing stuff. Because I'm always the one that says, you know what you should do. And you're the one that says, well, you know, there's this federal agency or there's this particular polymer formula that you could use.
Yeah, and there's a lot of educational institutions that people don't know about or associations that are out there that people don't even realize that they're available until you just happen to bring it up. No, I never heard of that. Do you know that in Norfolk, there's a ship repair association? And guess what? We repair ships there, but nobody correlated there actually is an association to repairing ships. Those are markets to connect into.
Thank you for taking some time to meet up and talk about our visit to Trailboard a couple of weeks ago. I do appreciate it.
I always enjoy spending time with you.
I will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of The Valley Today, a few minutes after noon, so meet me here then.